Hi, so today in this little mini lesson we're going to be learning about something called feedback, positive and negative feedback. Now, our bodies work with positive and negative feedback in order to maintain something called homeostasis. And when you think of the word homeostasis, I want you to think about the idea of your body's remaining balanced. Because we're in a constantly changing environment. It gets hot, it gets cold, we get hungry, we get full, we get sick, we get tired, and our bodies have to maintain a good balanced status or a homeostasis inside of them. And there are two main mechanisms that our bodies use in order to do that. One of them is called positive feedback, and the other is called negative feedback. Now, we're going to start with negative feedback first, because I think that's going to be a little bit easier for you. So in negative feedback, think about whenever you get ready for lunch, like right before lunch and you're hungry. So let's start off. Your body is in a state of being hungry. And when you're hungry, what do you do in response to being hungry? Well, you go and you eat. Now, after you eat, like think after Thanksgiving, you just had so much food and you're just like, you're so full and you couldn't eat anymore. Instead of being hungry, you become the opposite of that, which is not hungry. And if you're not hungry, what are you not going to do anymore? I remember whenever someone offered me another piece of pie after Thanksgiving, and I was like, oh, I can't, And so when I'm not hungry, I do the opposite of eating, and that is I don't eat. Now, if I don't eat for a long period of time, or if I don't eat, eventually what's going to become of me? I'm going to start to feel hungry again. And that sets us up all over. Now, this is a cycle. It's pretty easy to see. It goes around and around and around. And every day I get hungry, I eat, I become not hungry, I stop eating, and eventually I become hungry again and have to eat again. And our bodies do this because if I was eating all the time, eventually I'd kill myself with too much food. If I wasn't eating, eventually I would kill myself with not enough food. And so in order to make sure that we are staying balanced and maintaining that homeostasis, we have this negative feedback loop in order to keep us in that position. Now, why do we call it negative? When you think of negative, I want you to think about opposites. Because what's the opposite of hungry? Not hungry. What's the opposite of eating? Not eating. And so because we see the opposite, we see the negative of hungry, which is not hungry, happening, we refer to that as negative feedback. Does that mean negative feedback is bad? No. Negative feedback is actually really good. The only reason we call it negative is because of this idea of opposites. Okay? So that's one example, being hungry. Another one would be sleeping. We could easily come in and replace all of those words and have the same basic system. So if I go home at the end of today, it's a Friday, I've been working hard. At the end of the day, I'm going to be tired. And when I'm tired, what am I going to do? I'm going to sleep. And in the morning, whenever I wake up, after a long night of sleep, I'm going to be not tired. Or the opposite of tired. And then, if I'm not tired, what am I not going to do? I'm not going to crawl back in bed and sleep, and so I'm going to not sleep. So again, we see tired and then the opposite, not tired. We see sleep and the opposite, not sleeping. And that's where the name negative comes from. Not because it's bad, because this is actually really good for us, but because it is opposites. Now, the other mechanism that our bodies use to help us maintain this concept of homeostasis is something called positive feedback. Positive feedback, not always good. Just like negative is not necessarily bad, positive feedback is not necessarily good. So, I one time knew this girl who got really scared, and she panicked. And when she panicked, it made it hard for her to breathe. And she started to do what is called hyperventilate. And her hyperventilating caused her to panic even more. And that panicking then caused her to hyperventilate even more, until eventually she passed out. This is an example of positive feedback. Positive feedback because did we see any opposites in here? No, we saw panic, caused her to hyperventilate, and then we saw more of the original thing happen again. She panicked more, which caused her to hyperventilate more. Another great example dealing with panic of positive feedback, or dealing with being scared, think of sheep. You have a herd of sheep out there and they're grazing along, and then all of a sudden a bird comes down and one sheep gets scared and it jumps up and starts to run away a few feet, and that causes, whenever it runs, that running causes other sheep to become scared because they see this sheep running and they're thinking, oh my gosh, there must be a wolf coming or something. And so they get scared, and that causes them to run. And as they run, even more sheep become scared, which then causes more sheep to run. Until eventually we have the whole herd of sheep stampeded, and they are all running. Now, how does this keep us necessarily balanced? This is a great example of positive feedback, but it's not always something that we would think of in terms of being balanced. And so another example has to do with pregnancy. And in pregnancy, and this is where our body really uses positive and negative feedback, in situations where it's like pregnant. Whenever it's time for a baby to be born, a hormone called oxytocin is released, and that oxytocin causes contractions. You know, whenever somebody's like, ooh, and they think the baby's getting ready to be born, contractions actually cause the release of oxytocin. And what did we just say oxytocin causes more? Contractions. And we see this process to continue over and over and over again until eventually the baby is born. So when we think of positive feedback, it's the same. Don't think opposites. We're going to think more. Because we're going to see that one event, and that's going to lead to another event, which creates more of the original event. Which leads to another event, which really makes more of the original event. Positive feedback. And so both of these situations, both negative feedback and positive feedback, both work with our bodies to help maintain homeostasis. Sometimes negative feedback is what the body needs to help keep things right and balanced. Sometimes positive feedback is what the body needs to help keep things right and balanced. And so we use both of those in our lives in order to maintain this homeostasis.